Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Cyber Lounge webinar. This one is ending the debate on security versus compliance, and I'm joined by Ayoub Fandi of Salesforce. Ayoub, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, nice to meet you all. So Ayoub Fandi. So I'm currently working at Salesforce as a security GRC senior analyst, and I'm super excited to kind of present my take on this hotly discussed topic.
Excellent. And there are a few people in the live stream. We've had a bit of a problem trying to sort of get the link out there, so I'll be trying to do that while Ayoub's talking. But for those of you in there, if you do have any questions, they will be answered at the end. I'm just going to put this up here. Please get involved, ask any questions you have, and we'll come to them. So I think without further ado, I'll add this here, and I think we can begin. Ayoub?
Perfect. So yeah, let's start. So security versus compliance, super discussed topic. Just to set the scene for some of you, I think all of you kind of know this is a hotly discussed issue, but if you checked maybe Twitter or LinkedIn, maybe out of 10 posts, 1 or 2 would be about this debate. You have a couple of sides to the force, and you have to choose the right side. Either you're with security or security engineering against compliance, or you're with compliance and not against engineers, but having let's say for you a more rational position on why compliance is useful. So my goal here is kind of get through the debate, do a meme version literature review of what is said on the topic, then kind of go through both sides, so why compliance security needs compliance and why compliance needs security, and then kind of why we shouldn't care about that topic at all. And I think the best way for both to go forward is just to not talk about that at all and just understand that both have a role, and because both have a role, doing that distinction is doing no service to both of the different camps. So social media a literature review. So when you write a paper, you have to do a literature review to just know what has been said on the topic you're discussing, and just to ensure you know what is the previous body of knowledge before you add to it with your specific perspectives on it. So before delving into what I think, I will get to know what people think. So my understanding, of course, those two statements are extremely exaggerated. Maybe, I don't know, probably not, but uh, but I think it boils down to those two. So for me, like, compliance is, you either say compliance doesn't understand anything about security, about cloud, about infrastructure, about IT, about dev, like everything. Compliance has no idea. There's something that often is said in the cloud. So like audit professionals who are not very used to audit the cloud, they would say, yeah, so this AWS service is not global, it's regional, but he doesn't know. So I just gave him like the security groups that, made me do the less overhead, blah, blah, blah. And then kind of make fun of auditors because they don't understand some specific like cloud concepts, for example. And on the other side, people in compliance would say, oh, but those people, those engineers, they don't understand anything about stakeholder management. They don't understand that we have customers, we have business partners, we have sales to like kind of please, we have legal, all the regulations and requirements we have to comply to, but they only think about their command line, blah, blah, blah. So you have those like kind of two issues to the topic. And I think both sides, they don't really talk to one another because it's all in like blanket statements. All of that is, highly like, it's not precise at all. It's not specific at all. But I think it always boils down to those two statements. Like, even if you think I might like misrepresent the camps, from my understanding, I'll probably read everything that was said about those two issues on LinkedIn, for example. And I believe that's what it boils down to. So I think one thing to keep in mind is the way those two like areas think. So if we think about security compliance versus security engineering, I would say that compliance, they think with stakeholders in mind. So the goal of compliance is to think about, my decision is going to impact our customers first, regulators, so probably a country or specific industry, let's say FinServ, for example, internal stakeholders. So you have sales who sell stuff, make your company and pay your salary in the end. Legal who have to comply to a lot of those requirements as well, and they have direct relationship with regulators as well. And on the other side, security engineering, they think like attackers. So their point of view is from how we're going to get attacked and how can we protect ourselves against those evolving threats. But if you understand like the two areas, they think in a very different way. Like thinking like an attacker is very different than thinking like a regulator. So I think it also comes down to some of those first principles, like the way you do your job. In the end, it is very different because you don't have the same people in mind when you're performing tasks and you try to do your best job. Like if an audit is concluded and you have no findings, compliance would be happy. But if the same happens in security, like they wouldn't care that much because they would say, I don't care about that standard anyway. It's not proper standard. Even if I have no findings, look at all the holes we have. So we have different metrics to judge each and everyone's work. And I think when you look at the metrics used, you can understand how they view their job. Meaning, of course, if they view their job differently, then there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions and, super nice and fun debates. So let's go through the first side, why security needs compliance. So for me, my understanding, I work in GRC, so I'm more on the compliance side. For me, compliance is all about the customer because if you think about it, compliance is probably one of the only areas in security that has direct relationship with customers. So if you answer security questionnaires, if you do a customer audit, um, if you go through legal contract to check the information security clauses, all that would probably be done by the GRC team or compliance specifically. So all of those relationships that build and make through all of the pipeline to make sure it goes to an end and we get the money for the deal, information security is heavily involved. But GRC would be a lot more involved than any other area. So I think the goal of compliance is to be that gap and to bridge that gap, sorry, and to make sure those two worlds talk to one another. So they kind of the forefront regarding the customer. So the first statement, we trust you, but we need it to hear it for someone else, is let's say you're a security engineer and you go to a customer and you kind of explain your security posture. As of now, in 2021, 2022 now, we're not 2050 when we're going to have a council where you can see the security posture of every company, and like in 2 clicks you can know like what's their flaws, how they're working, etc. As of now, third party certificates are one of the way used by customer to assess if the company they want to be their supplier has at least a baseline level of security that was attested to be efficient by an external body. So we trust what you say. Like, of course, you're secure. There's no cyber attack, so of course you're secure. We trust all of you guys. But just to make sure, like, can we check if you have ISO? Can we check if you have SOC? Of course, for a security engineer, this has no value whatsoever because they would say, yeah, but there's a lot of clauses about documentation, a lot of the Annex A controls, they're not relevant, blah, blah, blah. So all this is probably true, but I don't think it's been true is relevant because a company thinks in profit and loss. I think true and false are relative statements in business. So because security is good, security in of itself is good. More security, like, of course, if security impedes the business, it's bad. But like, if you don't think about business overall, like having more security is always good. So the issue is from a security engineer's perspective, just security practitioner's perspective. Like locking down more and more would be good because it would lower the attack surface, and it would also like prevent attackers from doing as much damage. So because you think from the attacker's mindset, of course security is good. But if you think from the business stakeholders mindset, the highest level of security that makes the less disruption and makes us comply to everything we need to comply to is the right level, which is a very different level from the one as an engineer you're thinking about. So I think when we say we trust you and we need to hear it from someone else, like it boils down to what we need is to make sure that a body that everyone trusts is saying something about your security system, even though it's not the type of standard you would create it if you're an engineer, but no one would comply to it, of course, because it would be a bit too stringent. But I think having at least something from someone else that either you and I we don't know, we don't have any contacts with, is something that has value to a business, because independence, because etc. So I think that's the first point. Second point is linked to the first one. You need to stay in business. So to be honest, if you have no security certifications whatsoever, as growing business, scale up, for example, it's going to be super difficult for you to win new business. I think especially as when you're scale up, most of scale ups they would try to target like for example uh, FTSE 100 in the UK or Fortune 500 in the US, like all of those companies have massive procurement teams, massive legal teams, massive GRC teams. Like they would rank you from 1 to 10, then make you do this questionnaire, add it to those 5 meetings, add it to giving up these amount of information on your systems, etc., to just judge you and put you in the bucket of this is a high risk, medium risk, low risk, blah, blah, supplier. So if you don't do any of that, if you have no certifications, like they would just say either you're in the highest risk, so you're going to have a lot more work for each customer instead of having that specific certificate, or they would just say we don't do any business with you, we don't care. Like either you commit in paper in the contract that you're going to get, for example, ISO or SOC, or you don't have it, we're going to choose someone else. And if you think about it, like every company in their market, they have competitors that might have more emphasis on those certificates. So if they have them and you don't have it, and your unique value proposition is somewhat similar, but you have like a couple of things different, this could tilt like the scale towards them instead of you. And we're talking probably hundreds of thousands or millions in ARR for a SaaS software company. So I think really taking that into account means like just to have the deals you have, you have to have those certificates. But to win new business, it's a given. I think if people think it's not a given, I think that either don't work in the industry, or they have a very you know I would say evangelized way, like Winter Wonderland or something, like view of how it's done in practice and how important those things can be when negotiating with, I don't know, a major US bank or a huge retailer. So the last point for this side of the argument is, if I am the CEO of a company, I have a lot of power, of course, because I'm the CEO. And sometimes people, they react to very trivial things they care about. Maybe, for example, I don't know, a CEO likes to watch a specific TV show, and on one of the episodes they talk about ISO for, I don't know what type of TV show this person would watch, but to each their own. And maybe they watch that TV show, mention ISO. I have no idea why, but be sure the next day, if you're the security compliance guy at your company, the CEO is going to ring you and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Yeah. So do we have ISO? Okay, we're gonna have, yeah. Make it your priority. We need ISO. It's very important." And you don't know it comes from that TV show he just watched the previous day. But I think sometimes, like if they watch a debate on TV, or like some of the breaking news about cyber attack, uh, it would impact a lot, like just your day job and your priorities. And understanding that some of those standards, having that baseline, is something that is a bit more than just like rational. Like it's also a way for the company, for of course your customers, but like for some of the management to understand, like, okay, at least we have this. Okay, at least we have this. Of course, like we all know, all Target, we know all those companies that were just destroyed, even though they had all of those. But I think those specific events do not change the underlying principle that having them is probably better from both a rational and an emotional standpoint than not having them. So I think having those standards, and like if for example you work in financial services and you created a standard, be sure that all of your supply chain is going to comply to it. Because for it to have like wider adoption, if you create it yourself, like you have to make sure your own supply chain is compliant to it. So is also something that is going to be more important as time goes by, because I think people think compliance standards are going to be less and less because we're going to have more and more uh, consolidation among standards. I think the contrary. I think as time goes by, there's going to be, because of course we're going to say like in the future all companies are going to be software companies, but I think the way they're going to use software is going to be so different. And now automotive, financial services, retail, they're going to have very specific workloads and ways of working that are going to be all online. And I think a specific standard for each of those areas, maybe like a baseline ISO and then all of those extra ISOs for all of the different areas. But because it's always best done by practitioners, I think each area of business and each industry is going to have like one standard. So if you want to do business with all of them, yeah, be prepared to go through a lot of audits. So this is kind of it for that side of the argument. So next side of the argument is why compliance needs security. I don't know how it's small, but that's fine. So it says all about expertise. So compliance is great. Compliance is super helpful. It gives you that baseline you need. It gives you this ability to understand, like, at least if I do those things, I won't be missing any like major holes. Like, I'll have a lot of issues, but still, like, I know about identity and access management, about physical access, about HR, making sure all of those baselines are set. We have those controls, we make sure they're effective, we test them regularly, we do some internal audit, and then we kind of set for those. Like, if you think this is compliance, I think you would be correct. I think this represents more or less the added value of compliance. But if you think there is any other major advantage in terms of just security posture, I think you'd be a bit mistaken, because security has to evolve with attacks and has to evolve with emerging technologies. So there is two areas. So existing technologies, let's think about Log4j, for example, uh, can have new flaws, meaning attackers find new ways of exploiting existing technologies, meaning you have to adapt your posture on things you already have and you're already secure. On the other side, you have new technologies that are either too new for you to understand how to properly secure them, or are a mishmash of a lot of things but when they're all put together, you need specific security controls for like the overhaul. Meaning those two areas, compliance is going to be a bit behind, because if you think about it, like, you can't write a standard about something that didn't happen. You can only write about stuff that happened in the past, but the issue is to make sure you don't do any mistakes, because you're committing something to paper that's going to be followed by millions of companies worldwide. It probably takes a couple of years before anything significant can be put in paper for a certificate, because it's how it works. Like, if zero trust didn't pick up and no one did zero trust, like, there's no way for the next ISO version to have zero trust in it. So you need to have at least 2, 3, 4 years back and think, okay, so this was really something that changed the landscape in security. Let's add it in. So if you think about Kubernetes, you think about like more cloud workloads, etc. All those things, compliance is going to be trailing behind. Of course, you have specific frameworks like CCM from Cloud Security Alliance specifically for cloud workloads. But if we talk about SOC 2 and ISO, which are the you know, more widespread certifications worldwide, you have an ISO addition for cloud, but it's still like a couple of extra Annex A controls. So I think those areas, security is not going to be like it's going to be waiting for compliance. They have to move quick, because they think attackers, they don't think stakeholders. So because they think attackers, they have to move quick. So if they move quick, then compliance is going to be trailing behind by a couple of years at least. So regarding this, if all of the workloads are on Kubernetes and you're ISO certified, like, of course it's not enough. Like, all the specifics about your workloads is going to be not in any statement in any compliance framework probably. Um, so you have to work on it, find new ways, and this is where like security shines. You go through different practitioners, you go through open source, you go through different vendors who like propose solutions for all those new ways of of doing infrastructure, and all of those companies might also give you a lot of logging, a lot of stuff that you can then use to kind of give evidence and artifacts to use in an audit. So I think you really have to understand that once you get that through, that's perfect. But the next steps that really matter in terms of what is going on, because if you don't prevent against the upcoming attacks or the current attacks, even, like, then you're going to have major issues. So that's where this massive gap in understanding between stakeholder focus and attacker focus kind of shines. Like, if you have a stakeholder focus, you wouldn't have any clue what to do with passwordless, with Kubernetes, with etc. It wouldn't help at all, because this would probably not be questions by most of your like major Fortune 500 clients, and probably not questioned by any of the certificate you went through, like ISO, SOC, or any other. So that's why expertise and understanding the cutting edges is very critical, especially in security when it moves extremely fast and where being an attacker is a full-time job that pays a lot. So the last point is security engineers. Like, when you work in security compliance, you understand the business landscape, you understand some of the technical landscape, but probably at a very high level. If you're a security engineer, either you're in the CISO team, and then you would branch into helping, I don't know, specific dev teams, or you're embedded into development, so into, for example, a specific Scrum team, and you would be like the security champion for that team. So just think about it like you're a Scrum team, and you're the security engineer that works in that Scrum team. You would have a super deep understanding about the specific features your team is working on. From a technical standpoint, you would really understand the infrastructure, all the implementation details about how this was put in place. What trade-offs did we do? Why did we go for this instead of that? Because maybe we did that tool, we used that tool. There was not maybe like the cream of the crop, but that was the best that we could use because we have this legacy framework we use for Java, or this legacy component we use for Python, etc. So all of those specifics, compliance has no idea. Like, compliance doesn't know any of this because there's a bit too, especially if your development team is big. Like, there's so many Scrum teams, there's so many working on so many different features. Like, it's humanly impossible for you to know all this. So trust security engineers on this. They know all about. We tried to do this for authentication. We did this for secrets management. We did this for key rotation. All of those specifics they know. All those specifics they implemented themselves. So when you go to them for an audit, for example, or to make sure the controls are effective, like, they would know where to look. So they're experts of the how, and you would never be an expert of the how. It's not your role in compliance. So sometimes people in compliance, because they come from like understanding of like business stakeholder understanding, they would say you should do this because it's an ISO, or because this is best practice, and they would be condescending to you. But I think in this matter, the way they say it is probably bad, but like what they are trying to say is good. Like, they would say it's not your role, like it's not your job to know that. Like, you don't know a lot of things I know that make me think we should do it that way, which might not be the way set forward in your standard. But this is the only way regarding all of the things we have to make sure we keep together to make sure we can the service is available to our customers, and the site is up and stuff. So I think sometimes when we take those compliance standards as gospel, because we work with them all the time, we kind of miss the forest for the trees. Like, it also boils down to the specifics, because you have to showcase stuff that you don't really know about specifically because it's not your role. So when you showcase them, you have to make sure you have it as it is. And security engineers, they know it as it is. Like, they work on it on daily. It's their day job, it's what they're focusing on. They do research to make sure they can improve upon what's currently being done, etc. So I think they really need to be um, more trusted on that matter. And I think sometimes it can be some friction, because I know it all. Some compliance folks would come there and say, yeah, give me this list of IP addresses, blah blah blah, and then he would say, yeah, but IP addresses always change because it's dynamic in the cloud, blah blah blah, and then you say, I don't care, this should be done that way because I so like it's problematic. Like if you go that way, you would antagonize yourself with engineers, and it's not good because, as I said, like two sides of the same coin. And I think not seeing stuff from their perspective is also super bad because at the end, as I said, they implement the controls, and they're business experts uh, on the technology. You're a business expert on making sure customers are happy and stakeholders are happy. So both your roles are super important, and making sure everyone is empowered, because sometimes if you feel like you're being, I don't know, like I would say disrespected, but just like being told stuff like a lot better than the people who are talking to, like it can create resentment. It can create like a challenge, always like always going in like debates and stuff. I think, yeah, expertise is on the security engineering side, and you really need to make sure you value that expertise. I think it's all about, to be honest, it's all about soft skills. It's all about the way you speak to them. It's all about when you have an issue. For example, like let's say you talk about you're working on standard and you're making sure you have all the evidence ready. There's a specific area you don't really know in your specific company how it's done. You kind of understand the big picture, but you just wrangle, Slack, the security engine that works on that, and just say, yeah, do you have like half an hour? Just explain to me how we do this. You don't talk about any compliance framework. You don't talk about any of this. You just say like, how do we do MFA? How do we do SSO? Like, just walk me through it. Okay, okay. Can you go like a bit slow on this? Like, my knowledge is not that great on, I don't know, certificates or TLS, or just going through all of that work. Make sure like you value him or her as someone who has stuff to teach you. They're going to make you know more about specific areas of security, and just them feeling confident as experts is something that is super valuable and sometimes overlooked. Like everyone is an expert at something, but just seeing them as like box checker for you to make sure you make your people happy is not the way to go. Like you really have to focus on making sure they're valued as experts. All of the work they put in research and doing like poning boxes and going through a lot of stuff internally to make sure we're ready and stuff, like all of that is taken into account, is and you've given them the value they deserve. I might focus a lot on that area, but I think sometimes people, they can be a bit insensitive on that matter and really like kind of brush it like, yeah, yeah, of course they know, like they're expert, they know their job, like. But I think I think it's really something like you have to focus on. So just to kind of do a quick summary, so the baseline of controls from a framework would help both security and compliance most of the time, and then cutting edge, so focusing on very top of the notch stuff, it will also help both, because if you think about it, it would not help compliance in terms of like complying to a framework, but it would help them in terms of making sure customer assurance is high, because be sure that, for example, log4j has no links, quote unquote, to any compliance framework, but all of your customers are going to ask about it. So then maybe you're going to be some of the first stakeholders that the customers are going to talk to when they want to know more about this. But then you have to go to your engineers and understand what's being done, how it's being done, what's the time frame on stuff, like what are the kind of workarounds or patching going to do, what's going to be the impact in terms of availability for customers. All of that is something that's going to be done uh, by engineers, not linked to any framework whatsoever, but just to make sure we don't get into some major issues. And companies who see that some companies in their supply chain are not doing the proper work, especially when it's that massive, they might rethink about future deals and future partnerships, and extending I don't know, extra licenses to buy from you and stuff. So thinking deep about that. That has no link to compliance in terms of like the baseline, but it's super critical for customers as well. So it's not like black or white. There's a lot of gray area. But yeah, just to kind of work on this. So if you think about security, the end goal is always managing risk. It's always reducing risk. And Compliance would have a minimalist approach to risk because they would say, like, we need to comply to all of those standards, and if we comply to all of them, we have to also do risk assessments, and this is the risk of the business. And they would, the goal of compliance, from our perspective, is to make sure we take the maximum amount of risk, because the more risk that has business value, the better in terms of money, but to make sure that we don't compromise our company in terms of like our baseline. Security engineers would be the contrary. They would want to take the lowest amount of risk because they think like attackers. So if an attacker has a very small window, if they have enough time and resources, they would be able to get through. So they want us to take as little risk as possible to make sure they have less opportunities for attackers to get in. So risk management is always like in the middle, because who sets the risk needle? Who says this is the amount of risk we're going to take? This is the business. It's not compliance. It's not engineers. It's the business. The business says we're aggressive. We want to take as much risk as possible. We don't care because right now it's hyper growth. If we stale growth because we do X, Y, Z, or because we have to put 15 different controls on, I don't know, smartphones for employees, and it slows down on cold calling, or it slows down on opportunities with maybe small medium businesses, etc. They can't afford to do that. So they set the risk needle, and then you have to work with it, and you have to do the work to make sure with the risk needle they're set, you're as secure as possible. It's not security in a vacuum. It's not security by itself. It's as secure as the risk needle that the company set for you uh, can um, can manage. So I think can explain both sides. Now I'm going to explain why we shouldn't care about any of the things I just said. So everything I just said, you shouldn't care about it. Just kidding. But for me, this distinction, if you understand, like, both sides of the argument, they kind of come from different perspectives. Okay, but that's fine. Like, it's perfect to have someone who thinks like an attacker and someone else who thinks like stakeholders. Like, I think it's a great wealth of knowledge because you have one objective, which is security, but you have two completely different point of views to make sure you go through to that objective. So I think it's something that is often disregarded because each side is going to say the other side is wrong, but the other side is not wrong. The other side wants the same thing as you do. But of course, in the end, it always boils down to the customer. So it always boils down to profit and loss. But if we wanted profit and loss, we wouldn't work in compliance. We work in sales or in finance. We work in compliance, security compliance, so we care about security. So in the end, we have the same objective. It's just that I think focusing on technical stakeholders, so attackers in this case, is great to make sure you always improve. You don't really care about the baseline because the baseline is set by compliance, and they also help in making sure the controls are effective, and they work with that and they work with auditors. So engineers, they have to provide evidence for all of those baseline controls, but they can focus on what's cutting edge. They can focus on what's extremely relevant right now and tomorrow. And then compliance can focus on the now and can focus on the future, but the future of business, winning new business, making sure current business stays in and is not putting you in a higher risk category, and maybe just stopping working with you because of you lost your ISO, you have 15 non-conformities, probably impossible. But yeah, that the way you showcase your security posture is getting worse. So you have to be compliant to stay in business and win your business, but you have to be secure to stay in business and win your business. This is uh, as simple as I can put it. Like, let's be both if we want to stay in business and win your business. I think that really boils down to this. Like, there is no reason to choose one or the other. It's just different roles for different people. Like, I think if you work in GRC, you're going to be working a lot more with people than with machines, quote unquote. You're going to work a lot with people outside of security and outside of engineering as well. Maybe it's a bit difficult for I don't know, detection and response engineer to talk to someone in finance and talk about like very basic security awareness stuff. Like, they would say, okay, so when I change my password, I just added one at the end of it. And then you would say, okay, so no password manager, no MFA, no nothing. Okay, perfect. This person does not understand anything. But if you work in compliance, maybe you're a bit more used to people having a lower understanding of what, top of the notch security standards or personal security hygiene looks like. So you're a bit more understanding of those people because, they have different day jobs. Their job is not to understand security. Their job is, I don't know, to make sure everyone is paid on time, which is probably a bit relevant even for security people. So making sure you have someone that is a bit more focused on people who are outside of security is good, because for me, GRC to security overall and security engineering has kind of a similar role to CISO for security organization. Like, we're the lawyers of the security engineers. We kind of defend them against a lot of the attacks that can come through different sides of the business. Also, like the marketing experts, like sometimes it's a bit difficult for engineers to kind of explain the value out of their work in layman terms or business terms. GRC is their role. Like governance, risk management, it's all about making sure it's intelligible, understandable, and everyone understands why we're doing this, why we want this new tool, why our engineers are working, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks on this specific feature, etc. So all of this, we translate it into a language that is valuable to the business, and we're doing like communications and marketing for security, either through making sure executives are aware. Sorry, either through making sure executives are aware, or through making sure everyone knows the basics of security. So awareness is super critical. Of course, you would say the level of security awareness at the company is not up to the standards you want as a security engineer, but I think more security is better than less. So up to a certain point, which is something every security engineer believes. So making sure that everyone at least, I don't know, uses MFA, etc. If you can enforce it, good. But if the company is a bit small and don't have access to the resources, even to just buy like a off-the-shelf tool, making sure some of those like good hygiene routines are put in place is always better. I would say also your chief advocate in the business is also GRC most often, because they would kind of translate the wins of security. I don't know, 99% of all agile projects went through security assurance process or security risk assessment. All of the Scrum teams have one security champion. What could it be? I don't know. Salespeople are, going through security awareness training or through a security session once every quarter for at least 2 years now. All of those metrics are very relevant, and they help security overall, because you have security engineering, but you have also the SOC, security operations center. You also have people that work in different sides, maybe super customer focused, who only answer customers. You have security pre-sales in major SaaS companies. All of those areas, you need to make sure they all have a voice, and often GRC can help. Massive companies have security communications team, but in like lower and smaller companies, often GRC would take that role. So that's also important. And last but not least, from the other side, so from the business coming into security, GRC is your business jargon chief translator. So if you don't understand anything about profit and loss, about we need to, for I don't know, to gain 2 million ARR, we need to do this, that, or the other. Like how it translates security requirements should be done by GRC, and they would help in understanding like how does this relate to me. Like that's perfect. Of course, we want to do more money. Like I love money. Okay, that's fine. But like, how as an engineer, how can I work towards that role? How can I work towards making sure we achieve those outcomes? So your role is to make sure he or she understands in their terms, like not in yours, not in the businesses. But if she's not sure about like what should be the next step, should we focus more about on IAM, should we focus more about on like threat detection, should we focus more on, I don't know, on improving security of our cloud workloads? Like you would be the person to kind of translate that and say, yeah, so availability is priority number one, so you should focus on everything related to availability of workload, making sure proper nodes functioning well, proper observability using, I don't know, Datadog, third-party tool, just through tools already available with the software we have. So all because then expertise kicks in. So when they understand what should be done, then the expertise kicks in, and then they know the next steps. But first, you have to set this view, the standard, and then they will work through it. And of course, it's not only coming from the business. Like it's sometimes coming from like overall engineering, like engineering management, tech leads, and then security would like embed themselves into what engineering leaderships wants to be the focus for the upcoming year or upcoming quarters. So I think this is probably it for me. I think I kind of focus on all of these areas that should have enough focus, and like just to kind of finish on this. When I say no one cares about that distinction, it's because, as I said, we work towards the same thing with just different lenses. And having two people looking at the same thing with different eyes is a very good thing. So I think we should be, grateful that we have different brains, different types of individuals, diverse backgrounds working on one issue, because better solve it twice than solve it once. So solve it twice in two different ways is always better. So that's kind of it for this presentation. If you have any questions.
Hi, that was great. So I just removed that. Yeah, we've got some questions. I'd just like to say that was a great presentation. I got some lovely messages telling me how good it was. But yeah, so everyone who's still watching, yeah, just get your questions in as it says in the bottom, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. I'd just like to start with the most recent one. Manil, he asks, while the ideal scenario is to have no distinction, how do you convey that within the organization? Who would look at compliance as a market enabler and security an internal cost center, or compliance and security as barriers to the business?
So make sure I understand the question. So if I understand the question, I think in most companies, I'm going to be a bit blunt, but in most companies, I think security is still seen as kind of a cost center. But I think it's not specific to security. I think it's the case for IT overall. Of course, like there's application security, which is more engineering, but I think it takes time to change mindsets and mentalities on this issue. But I think compliance is a big helper. I think because compliance is focused on the business, and a business is doing business, that's kind of its purpose. I think the stakeholders that are the most focused on the business side are the ones who are going to improve the situation of security overall the most. That's why the chief information security officer, CISO, is like stakeholder management 101. Like his role is just to have meetings, talk about everything to everyone, making sure everyone's happy, external regulators, your team overall, talking to all of the engineering leadership. So his role, her role, is just to make sure that everyone's happy, everything's moving forward. We have budget, we can hire new people. So I think it's going to take a lot of time, and I think all of the cyber attacks will help probably because the more we talk about security on TV or on social media, the more businesses are going to say, "Hey, I think we have people working security. Let's talk to them."
Yeah, I mean that's the same with, I mean, a lot of things, and nobody really acts until,
Yeah,
I guess, disasters happen. It's kind of
exactly,
crazy.
exactly.
Yeah, we've got a question here by Amarnath. Which one should I invest in, security or compliance?
Um, I would say like the investment on compliance is minimal. I would say it doesn't cost as much to get like ISO, etc. I think you just need to have one. Like if in the US, the only country who does something else than ISO, you get SOC 2. But anywhere else in the world, you probably get ISO. But then I would say that most of your money should go to security, quote unquote, because once you have the baseline set, it costs some money to have all of the workloads on the cloud, making sure you have proper tooling for security, observability. Um, I think money should go there because you need maybe one headcount. You need someone focused on making sure all the controls, internal audit is done properly, and then that's more or less it. And then this headcount is also going to be more like customer focused, doing security awareness, etc. It depends on the size of the company, but I think then like because it needs expertise. Like you need to be an expert in a specific area. If you only have one person doing all of security at a company, yeah, it's going to be some long nights and some no vacations.
Yeah. We got so Fern has said being able to restore core systems to known working state cannot be overrated.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and then then Manil has responded to that and said having a mechanism or process to demonstrate that in case such a thing happens, that they're prepared is equally important.
hmm
And then he said that I think I don't remember which part this was. I think this was why compliance needs security. I believe
hmm
that slide. He says it's a fair point, Ayoub, and I think we would see more and more of these standards moving towards giving a guideline rather than rigid controls. We would have more compliance principles and objectives, and have the flexibility to define how we as an organization plan to achieve it.
Yeah. It's a great point. But I think this is I think the way it's going to go. But I think the issue is when you want to audit this, the auditor has to be a lot more technical. Because if it's super defined in the standard, then it's easy for the auditor to kind of understand what he's looking for. But if it's an overall principle, and then it's the way it's defined in the company is very specific, then the auditor has to have quite a good amount of technical knowledge to kind of understand what he's actually going to look for to make sure it complies to that principle. So yeah, us guys in GRC, we have to do more on technical side.
Yeah. So what can compliance do? What can compliance practitioners do to bridge the gap with engineering?
So I would say I'd say compliance has more work than engineers, because we know why we do security, and I think engineers knows how. So I think we need to bridge the gap on the how. I think people in GRC, they have to be more technically focused. I think at least like the baseline security, the cloud certification. So certified cloud practitioner from AWS and the equivalents from Google and Azure. I think they're really something that everyone should look forward to get, especially this year, because cloud, like every company is going to end up in the cloud, except the companies that actually build the clouds. So you need to have this baseline, because if you don't really understand how it works, and then you have to audit and you have to like attest to the controls being effective, and you have no idea like what S3 is, what bucket is, it's going to be like a big issue, because then the cutting edge is getting like bigger and bigger. Cloud is like completely normal for every engineer now, and for you it's still like kind of difficult to understand. And then we build on top of that a lot of tooling, all extra stuff. Like companies are getting billions in funding, and they're just companies like built on cloud security. They're only on the cloud and they're getting billions in funding. So if you don't really understand what's the landscape for cloud and how security is done in the cloud, going to have a very tough time. And more those debates that have like no point, they're going to have a lot more point, because if you're completely like remote from what's going on, then they have a right to say like, why are you there?
Yeah. Um, so, so yeah, compliance. If it's trailing behind, why do you think we should base our security strategies on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think even if it's trailing behind, it's always, as I said, like probably a couple of years behind. As I said, like to stay in business, to win new business, you have to have at least something that showcases to customers that you comply to a security standard. Like it's always like having one lock on your door is probably not going to make you super secure, but it's a lot more secure than having zero locks. So, like, of course, it's not amazing, but having none is a lot worse than having one bad, because it's going to deter a lot of attacks. Probably not all of them, probably not a lot, but at least some. So having one, especially like if the state mandates you to have one lock at least, like just take that analogy to ISO. Like you have to have at least one security standards to do business with us. Let's have one, maybe like having more money to pay your salary, as I often say. Like in the end, you benefit to that, because the more business we win, the better your situation is at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about having deterrent, the psychological element of that, I suppose.
Mm.
Yeah, so couldn't we change the compliance frameworks to better align with the security practitioners?
Mm, I think the issue that is often like practitioners are in the boards of all of the standards when they're being created, but I think if all of the practitioners that are cutting edge were doing the standards, I think they would be impossible to comply with. To be honest, like if you ask any expert on, I don't know, INM, and you would say like, what's the best way to authenticate to service? Like they would get you through us like 50 pages of stuff, and you would say, if you don't do any of this, like you need to do at least 50 things here to for me to consider you secure. Their baseline is not the baseline of what should be a baseline worldwide. Like just think about that. Like if you're in security company that has like 50 excuse me, if you're a company that has 50, 60, 70, 100 security staff full time, the amount of refinement in your security posture is going to be a lot different than a company that has one or two people. But the issue is the company that has one or two, they probably have two, three, 400 employees doing something else. And those employees, they make the whole company that also has to have those compliance standards to make business. So if we have super stringent standards, like all of the small and medium businesses, just forget about it. Like none of them, especially if they're not SaaS. Like if you're, I don't know, an O&M OEM for like BMW, and you're doing just a couple of spare pieces for them, like probably one person doing everything related to computers. So that person has to go through, for example, ISO. Like if it was something super crazy, like having SSO, having all of that stuff, like there's only one individual and they have 15 jobs. So it's not practical. I think we need to think about all companies and not like just our filter bubble of SaaS and like software first. And like, most companies are not like software first. Like we need
Mhm.
to make sure we understand the broad landscape of business and not just like what we really focus on and very cutting edge.
Yeah, you spoke a lot about why, in practice, nobody should care. So,
Hmm.
if no one should care, why are we having like why is everyone talking about that? Why are we having that debate?
That's a good. Why am I here? That's a question you're asking right now. Yeah, I think people people like to talk, like to have debates online. I think it's there's a good talk, make some good exposition and discussions, and everyone likes a good debate,
Mm.
a good fight in the comments and stuff. So I think when you have like a phrase that is that polarizing, we just put like, what do you think about security versus compliance? Or we don't care about compliance, or compliance is amazing and we don't care about cutting edge stuff. Like it's going to stir up a lot of comments, and I think yeah, it's just fun to discuss that topic. But I just think like discussing it itself, like I've probably read hundreds of posts on that issue, and I've never seen like anything moving the needle forward. Like the type of stuff that was discussed 3 years ago is the same. So I think
Yeah.
it's good for its own sake, but I don't think it brings any specific value to like the industry.
Yeah, and okay, I'm going to do the last question. Everyone in the comments, I'd just like to thank for watching. If you want to watch a full this full webinar again, it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So that's West Point Cyber Talent. I'll try and put it in the comments, the link to it later. So that'll be uploaded later today. But yeah, just last question. So from the security engineers and the compliance, who has the compliance people? Who has the most work to bridge the gap with the other?
So my take on it is compliance. I think because compliance understands the business, I think they have to do the extra work. I think they have to understand the technical side more. And I also think that they have to be better translators. I think they have to do a better job of making sure people in engineering and security technical folks, they really understand what's being asked of them and why. And I think often when you give a good why and you talk in their terms, they're going to be a lot more on board. And that's something I've seen in my personal experience when I was making sure they understood like, we're doing this, I know you hate it, I know you don't care about it, but it's for this purpose. Then they would say, oh, okay, let me help you then. Like they would trust you as a person because you build those connections complete soft skills, no technical skills required, just be a good human being. That's super helpful. But then when you add into it, like making sure you're a good translator, and you have the right approach with them, and make them understand why we do things. I think there's really something on the compliance's hand. I think you have a greater relationship, and it's easier for you as well to get what you need.
Okay, well, I just say thank you. We're coming to an end now. There's lots of people in the comments saying thanks for the session, for great webinar,
No worries.
very thought provoking and everything. So yeah, I'll say for those of you who want the full version, that'll be uploaded, and I'll send a link if you're following Ayoub or anything like that. I'm sure he'll upload it.
Yeah.
And don't forget to join us in the Cyber Lounge group on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'll try and post it there, and we get lots of cybersecurity focused content on there, including snippets from these kind of webinars just uploaded, in case people miss them. So yeah, I think without further ado, this will come to a close. So I'd just like to thank you, Ayoub, again.
No worries.
Fantastic event, and everyone in the comments, thank you for watching.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye bye.